Hello, my name is Kathy Benuck, and I'm here at CastleHill Media Studios in Bedford, which we have been for the last 3 shows. And again, this show eventually will be seen on our public access station, but you won't have to wait to see it because we'll be getting it right up on YouTube very, very quickly and telling you about it through Patch and other means. But I'm really excited about today's show because it is actually the launch of a brand new show that is going to be called Public Officials Tell It Like It Is. And this has come about kind of through popular demand, believe it or not. You've watched my show, Tell It Like It Is, and we've tried to hit on a number of different topics and give you factual information. And now that the show has developed a following and people have found it to be an information piece, it really made sense to kind of have a separate standalone show also, which, for the sake of easiness and for people to remember, is called Public Officials Tell It Like It Is, and will feature, hopefully, lots of public officials talking about lots of subjects that you need to know about from their perspective. And those are the folks that are the experts, and those are the folks that we need to hear. So, having said that, you can already see that the first guest of this first show is none other than Bedford Police Chief John Bryfonski. Now, just 5 days ago, I taped a show, a Tell It Like It Is show with the chief, and that was dealing totally with high-tech policing, and it already is available on YouTube and such for you to see. And we got into all of the technological needs that exist today for police departments and how Bedford has been very, very proactive. And that's a subject that we're going to continue to explore. And I think you'll really, if you haven't seen that show yet, watch it, because we have some great outdoor footage too, which maybe the chief will touch upon today. But above and beyond the whole high-tech policing issue is the fact that right now, this is town budget development season. And as we're sitting here today, tomorrow night, the Bedford Town Council will once again have a budget workshop. And a week from now, on December it'll fall on the 7th, I believe, Wednesday, at 5 o'clock, they'll actually be starting their council meeting. And at that point, it's expected that they will vote on that proposed budget. So one of the things that came out of our discussion the other day was the need for people to totally understand some of the needs of the Bedford Police Department, which we're going to be zeroing in on some of that today. So we'll be talking about the high-tech part of things, but we'll also be talking about the need for people to really understand the current needs and priorities of the Bedford Police Department, a lot of which aren't in that proposed budget. So, with that, Chief, it's good to have you back, and we covered a tremendous amount of ground the other day, and I know the whole high-tech aspect of the police department is multifaceted, and we were really only able to get into a couple of the different parts. We talked about the new cruisers and the technological abilities they have. We talked about some of the training, the internet, the intranet, and so on, but we really only touched on it. So with that, I want to go immediately to you, because I know you know how to prioritize, and I know that some subjects are much more important to you than others. So kind of continuing onward, let's go for it.
Sure.
Okay.
Well, high-tech policing is a great way to describe how we have taken the technological capabilities of Bedford PD and enhanced them for a variety of reasons. One of the major efforts that I have put in place at Bedford PD by using technology is to be able to be more efficient and effective. Efficiency and effectiveness are two different things, obviously. And in a time where the taxpayer is really concerned about getting the best value for their dollar in whatever public service they're purchasing through their taxes, the police department and public safety is no different. And one of the portions of the segment that we did concerning the new police interceptor talked about how much more fuel efficient the vehicle is, how much more capable the vehicle is. Because of the technology that's inherent in that new platform, it allows us to be much more flexible in the future in thinking about not having to purchase sport utility vehicles, because these new interceptors are all-wheel drive. They're much more fuel efficient than the SUVs, and they're just as capable as those SUVs. So in everything that we do here at Bedford PD, we're always cognizant and mindful of making sure that we talk about and consider the most efficient way of delivering service to our residents and making sure that they're getting what they need, but they're also paying for only what they need and getting the best bang for the buck, so to speak. The Ford Police Interceptor is just one example of how we're using technology, turning that platform into a mobile office for our officers to keep them more visible, to keep them on the road, so that they provide that deterrent effect in a variety of different ways. You know, just having a cruiser parked in your neighborhood, excuse me, is comforting. But it also, absolutely, and also it certainly prevents crime from occurring in that surrounding area, not only where the cruiser is visible, but people passing by. Same holds true in commercial establishments. Oftentimes we will have directed and deterrent patrols to defeat shoplifting or to affect shoplifting or other types of larceny and property crime that occurs in and around commercial establishments. Having that officer in that cruiser where they can be doing multiple things, multitasking, if you will, as opposed to having to leave the cruiser, drive back to the station, and use a piece of equipment in the station to fulfill another task. If we can perform that function in the car, then we are becoming much more effective and efficient. So.
Now, I wonder if I could just kind of interrupt with a quick question. I think the fuel efficiency part of it, the cost savings and so on is all fabulous, but one of the things that I think is maybe even more fabulous is the fact that these vehicles are so much safer for the police officers who are in them every day. As you say, they're officers,
right,
so to speak. And I think the safety factor is huge and something that we as Bedford residents need to like wholeheartedly support, even if they took more gas, which they don't. You know, I think the safety of the officers has to be of even more importance than the cost or fuel savings. Now, I know that Bedford only has been able this year to bring on 3, and we have an aging fleet that needs to be replaced. To my way of thinking, I mean, if I had my way, there would be enough money in the budget to replace the whole fleet at once, and I know that's not the case. So I'd kind of like to ask you what the scheduling is, and if there is anything in the proposed 2013 budget to get more of these babies on the road, and how long it's actually, I mean, things as they are now, how many years are we looking at before our whole fleet is that? Because personally, I don't, as a private citizen, want that to be a long process. I would like to be able to drive by the police station in January and see the entire parking lot full of those cars, and the old ones go to wherever old police cars go. So what's the deal financially? I mean, are you going to be able to get some more on the road right away, or what?
The town manager has proposed that we add 3 additional police interceptors to the current fleet of 3 police interceptors that we introduced into the fleet this year.
Okay.
So the 2013 proposed budget from the manager to the council does reflect the need for 3 additional vehicles. Based on the mileage of our current Crown Victoria police interceptors, we can predict, based on the mileage and based on our experience in terms of maintenance costs, that those vehicles, at least 3 more, will be ready for surplus by the time the public votes on the town budget, and that money hopefully then becomes available, and then we turn that into bids, purchase orders, and then the vehicles are then built and then delivered and then upfitted and put into use.
So what, that'd be a minimum of halfway through 2013, if not longer?
If not longer. Unfortunately, this past year, because the entire police fleets throughout the United States were changing over, many of the components, as we discussed in the segment previously, did not transfer over from the older Crown Victoria police interceptors to the new police interceptors. That means that those vendor supplied parts were on back order, and as a result, while the cars were delivered mid to late summer, it wasn't until fall that we were able to begin to deploy those vehicles. We're hoping that next year that the turnaround time for upfit is much shorter.
But the possibility could be that it might be closer to 2014 by the time they actually be delivered and ready to rock.
It could be, and as our concern is that the mileage that we have on the current Crown Victorias that we have slated for surplus next year will become an added maintenance and cost burden to us as we try to keep those vehicles on the road and making sure that they're safe. We certainly can't put a vehicle out on the road that's not safe and capable for all types and full range of police activity. But as we move forward in the out years, if we continue on a 3-vehicle replacement program, by at least 2015, we should have enough vehicles that have been replaced, keeping to that schedule, so that we have a good basis and solid police interceptor fleet out there that's much more fuel efficient, much more safe for our officers and the residents, and much more capable.
Now let me ask you this, and I realize you have to work with the constraints of town budgets and what the town council will approve, and then of course what the voters will approve. The town council worries me more than the voters, quite frankly, because I think that if you were able to get out enough to make your case to the voters would see the reasonableness of trying to not have to wait all the way to 2015. If you had your druthers, I mean, wouldn't the best thing all the way around, you know, long-term savings, fuel savings, and so on? But again, to me, the paramount issue is the men and women riding around in those things. If you had your druthers, wouldn't you like to have them all this year and not have to wait?
Well, in a perfect world, if there was an unlimited amount of money, sure, that would be great. But we recognize, I recognize certainly that money is in short supply everywhere. The economy is recovering, I think, to some degree. And certainly at Bedford PD, we're mindful that while we have critical needs, we ourselves have to prioritize our needs.
Yeah, but the safety of officers, I think, is a priority need.
It absolutely is, and but even more so than the addition of police vehicles, the highest priority is staffing. At the end of the public safety service discussion, it's the men and women in uniform or the detectives that are the pointy end of the spear, so to speak, in terms of delivering public safety service to our residents here in Bedford.
I want to talk with you about that a little bit, because it goes back to what, 2005, that the study was done that said the Bedford police should have 40 officers to have a best case scenario for our town in terms of public safety to us, and in terms of the safety and efficiency of the department being able to fulfill all its duties while still keeping its men and women safe. And I know we're not anywhere near 40, and yet since 2005, I wish I had thought to go back and look at the population figure for Bedford in 2005, but there's no question the population has gone up. And then I kind of made a couple of notes to myself, well, what else has changed? Well, obviously a lot more houses have been built since 2005, including, you know, a couple of large developments. There's senior complexes here in town that did not exist then, so wouldn't have been factored into the thinking. There's many more new office buildings, many more businesses, many more big box stores, all of which brings in more and more people into town and places more and more demands on our public safety folks, both police and fire. More traffic. I don't think anybody would debate that we have a whole lot more traffic today in 2012 than we did in 2005. And I don't know, maybe police chiefs or residents of some of the big cities near us, Manchester and Nashua, might not want me to say, but I'll say it anyway. The fact that their crime has increased, there's a spillover to us in terms of effect on the community and such. So 2005, they wanted 40. And how many do you have now?
Right now, our current authorized staffing is 33 sworn members.
33.
Today, in December of 2012, we were at 32. We have one vacancy.
Right.
and
Right.
we're in the process of filling that vacancy right now.
But you're still 7 shorter than 2005 numbers said that you should have had.
Well, correct. Actually, the department began to ramp up based on that study and some other designated needs. My predecessor, Chief Bailey, was able to increase staffing up to 35, and then that was depleted back down to an authorized strength of 33. So since 2009, we've suffered a 6% staffing reduction. At the same time that the calls for service, meaning the activity that is coming into the department, over which we have no control. During the various budget workshops, I describe it as the proverbial garden hose with no faucet control. It's on, someone else someplace is controlling it. Sometimes it's a gush, sometimes it's a trickle, but we have no control. But what we do know is that since 2009, the number of calls for service coming into the police department continue to increase to the level of about 22% over that time
That's
frame.
a lot.
At the same time, we've had a reduction in staffing of 6%. The study that you're referring to was prepared by MRI as a result of a contract that they had with the town at that time.
And again, 2005. So, I mean, my thinking is that if they thought 40 was a reasonable number in 2005, and I'm sure they didn't pad it with extra bodies or anything, I mean, we're talking 8 years later. So that number of 40 is probably still not enough if you look at all the 2013 statistics that will come into play.
One of the areas that I did look at, and in trying to make sure that that I inform the public so that they can make the best value judgment in terms of what level of police service that they desire here in Bedford, is to compare Bedford to both regional as well as national standards. The FBI frequently conducts these studies, and they have printed the most recent numbers, which for 2010 indicate that in terms of police officers per 1,000 inhabitants, here currently we are at 1.6. The Northeast region for cities our size, which is from 10,000 to 24,999. The New England region standard for staffing for police is 1.8. And across the United States, for all cities of 10,000 up to 25,000, it's 1.9. If we were to staff up to 1.8, we would be approaching that 38 to 40 number. If we went up to 1.9, we'd be close to 40. But in reading the study that MRI produced, and you mentioned it earlier, and that is not only the increase in residential stock, but also a fairly substantial economic development. Bedford Mall has been rejuvenated. The addition of several new big box stores in town over the last several years.
Yeah, we got Kohl's, we got Lowe's. I mean, there's a whole bunch of them that obviously bring in a lot of people every day, both workers and shoppers. And obviously buildings like that and the security issues and so on add a whole new element to public safety issues and concerns that didn't exist before.
And they do. One of the aspects of the MRI study, which I didn't see, was a review of what the residential population of the town of Bedford is as opposed to what the daytime population is. It's vastly different.
Big difference, yeah.
Let's consider for a moment Constitution Drive, where the police and fire and public safety complex sits.
Most of those buildings weren't even there, were they, in 2005?
I'm not exactly sure, but suffice to say that, let's say at 2 o'clock in the morning, the only people that are there are the firefighters and the police officers and communications people. The residential population of Constitution Drive is maybe 8 people. During the day, it's probably 2,000. So while there is no magic formula that I know of where we can compute what our projected daytime population here in Bedford is, but based on a residential population of about 21,000, recognizing that some portion of those folks leave town to work someplace else, others remain in Bedford, either at home working or working at a business in Bedford. We believe that our daytime population, discounting the traffic that moves through town, is probably in the vicinity of about 50,000, 55,000. So what we
Which is a city status,
which is a
not
city
a town.
status. In addition to that, we know from traffic counts that 101 alone, just passing in front of the police station, handles about 24,000 cars in a 24-hour period. Bedford happens to be the neck of the funnel that involves bringing traffic from the region into the metropolitan Manchester area. And as a result, of course, we have to suffer and deal with not only congestion, but also the attendant accidents, highway safety issues that goes along with being the neck of the funnel where it constricts. So we're policing a community during the daytime, Monday through Friday, we believe, conservatively at around 50 to 55,000. We have probably 10 to 12,000 vehicles with multiple occupants and some that are transiting through at the same time. And so we have to be prepared to staff the department in a way that can effectively handle the activity that comes in over which we have no control, and look at the trending numbers in terms of activity that we project into the future, and begin to build the department to be able to be reflective of what the needs will be in 2013, 14, 15, and beyond. One of the major considerations that we have is that police officer, firefighters, paramedics are not off-the-shelf products. We can buy an iPad, we can buy a computer and plug it in, program it, and it's ready to go. It takes about a year to advertise, find a group of candidates, whittle that group of candidates down to a meaningful number, review those candidates, select the top one or two, go through an extensive background medical process, psychological examination, polygraph, that takes some period of time, and then put them into an academy, waiting for that to get scheduled, bring them back out of the academy, and then put them through a Bedford field officer training program. That gets them acclimated to the department and the needs of the community. That takes all about a year. So when we begin to think about what our staffing needs will be in the out years, we need to be able to we need to factor in the time it takes to be able to field those folks in the out years. Now, recently we filled a position using from the ranks of law enforcement within New Hampshire, and that's a great thing. It shortens the process up from about a year
had the experience,
down to about 6 months. But even 6 months is a fairly lengthy period.
Of course, it's a lengthy period. And you know, one of the things I didn't say when I was talking about the changes, you know, since 2005. In 2005, we didn't have our own high school, which I don't know what the student population is. I'm guessing it's somewhere about 1,500 thereabouts, plus what, a couple of hundred staff or whatever. So right there, that building alone has to be a huge public safety concern, because if anything happened there, you need people to respond, whether it's police or fire. And that wasn't even in the equation in 2005.
We're building the capacity in the Bedford Police Department to be able to handle any eventuality at the high school. We have one school resource officer there now. We're looking at additional...
But there used to be two, right? One for Lurgio and one for the high school. Isn't the job shared now?
There was two, now there's
one, right? For both buildings.
Right.
And Lurgio's what, around 900, 1,000 kids or something? It's a pretty good sized school.
I think you're fairly accurate in terms of the combined population.
It's a lot.
We're looking at other types of programs that our school resource officer can deliver to students. Of particular concern to me, and again based on my background from the Drug Enforcement Administration, is getting information out to the parents and children concerning prescription drug abuse.
Yeah, that's huge these days.
It is the fastest growing substance abuse problem. When I review property crime statistics, not only from Bedford, but when I talk to area chiefs, they all say, and they all have told me, and we all exchange information, and it all points to prescription drug abuse driving property crime, not only here in Bedford, but in the surrounding communities. And one of the best ways to combat that, based on my knowledge in 27 years working with substance abuse, is to address it and aggressively attack it when our young folks are capable of assimilating that information and understanding that they are presented with choices and there are consequences. And that given that information and encouraging and integrating parents into that discussion at a younger age. One of the statistics that has a lot of impact with people is that 50% of the teens who became addicted to prescription painkillers began using prescription painkillers before the age of 15. That's
That early?
That's a national
Wow.
statistic. And so we need to begin
That's scary.
it is very scary. And we need to talk to our children. Our parents need to talk to our children about prescription drugs at an age that is younger than what we once thought. So that's an additional program and capacity that we're looking to bring to both the middle school and the high school in 2013 with our existing SRO. There are other programs, community policing programs, that we have deployed and delivered, and we want to continue on into 2013.
Which, of course, needs manpower.
It does result in the requirement for folks to be able to do that. Currently, all the officers that are involved in the Are You OK program, which we were instrumental in beginning at the police department, as well as the neighborhood programs, the juvenile and young adult programs, the senior citizen programs, and the business and retail programs are all done with existing staff who, on any given day, can be called and are called to answer those calls for service.
Sure, of course, yeah.
As that activity level...
well, yeah, you're understaffed.
Right. When that activity level continues to mount, the additional capacity that we have in terms of a reserve of having those officers to be able to do those programs will diminish. So I'm predicting that based on the trending numbers that we see in terms of overall activity, we are looking at about an 8% increase this year alone in 2012 in terms of calls for service. From, as I said, from 2009 to 2012, it's about a 22% increase. So when we factor that out, we're projecting an 8 to 12% yearly annual increase in our calls for service. So as staffing remains stable and flat and calls for service increase at a projected rate over the next 3 to 5 years, the capacity for the department to deliver these other non-core services, and some would argue that community policing is a core service. It is a core service.
I think it is. Yeah.
I agree that it is something that the community, I think, has overwhelmingly supported and is very happy with. But when we balance that program against the need for sending a police officer to a crime, to a motor vehicle accident, to a disturbance, to a burglary call, those take precedence. Those are priority calls, and they will always take precedence over other types of programs that don't have a public safety, life safety component to them. So if we believe that it's important to continue community policing programs, to continue deterrent and preventative patrols, then we need to be able to plan for that in the future based on what we see for numbers. You know, we've gone to great lengths this year in trying to get better data to be able to analyze what our current needs are, and from that be able to project what our future needs are.
I've heard you talk about the data, and there's no question that you can justify the need for a full staff. And I have to tell you, I have to tell the viewers this, excuse me, what I find extraordinarily upsetting is the fact that the proposed budget, which will at this point in time add at least 10 cents to our tax rate if it's approved, only calls for one new police officer. And I find this appalling. There are other staff requests in there too, and I'm not saying those other staff requests are important. I'm sure the department heads who requested them can justify them, and I know the town manager greatly reduced the number of positions that she's put in the proposed budget from what was requested by department heads. But to my way of thinking, public safety has to be paramount, and yet the budget is only calling for one new cop. You only put in for two. Truth be told, all right, for the maximum best situation, and I know you were conservative with two, what should it really be? I mean, truthfully, I don't believe it's only two. What should it really be that we would hire to have not only the appropriate protection at all times, but again, I'm going to go back to that old saw, that the men and women in the department are protected themselves and safe? I don't believe it's only 2.
It's residential safety and officer safety that are concurrent, and they are foremost and paramount in my mind as they are in the residents'
Yep.
mind. We need to make sure that we have sufficient officers that are able to respond to those critical life safety and life endangering needs that either our residents or folks that are transiting through town may have. To answer your question specifically, when we look at the national and regional numbers, if we were consistent with the New England regional numbers, then we would staff up to at least 38 officers. It's 37.8, I believe, which would be
So that would be how many more this year?
That would be 5.
That's what I thought.
So we would go from 33 to 38, and that would bring us in line with what the regional standard is. We would go to 40 or 39 and a portion if we were to adhere to the national standard of what a community this size.
So as a professional, and you are certainly a professional with many, many years of experience, you're saying really for us to be fully protected in Bedford in 2013, we really need 5 more cops on the road. We really do. And somewhere there's a disconnect. And I'm not blaming this on the town manager, because her job has to be to crunch the numbers and try to keep everybody happy. But I think there's a disconnect that the town council isn't sitting there going, whoa, this has to be happen. I mean, this has to be maybe the most important thing we look at this year. I mean, that is my thinking. And I'm going to tell you something. If at their workshop next week, one of them doesn't have enough courage to say that, or that they go forward in January with the budget that says, well, we'll hire 1 cop. I personally think there should be a public uproar over that. I personally think we should be down there with torches if we have to be.
I appreciate the support that you give us.
And I hope you're listening. I mean, think about it. Listen to what he's saying. And if you're not, I mean, I'm sure we're going to do some more shows. Just analyze the whole thing. Where Bedford was, where it was in 2005 when they said we needed 40 cops. Where we are today, all of the changes that we've talked about, all of the new demands, all of the new calls for services, all the increases, think about it. Do you think it's a good idea that we would only get 1 this year or 2 this year? Or do you think that the man that we hired to run this department, who is the professional, let's say he's the surgeon in charge of the operating room, and he's saying, I need 5 to make it right. Shouldn't we be supporting that? And if our town council can't see that, isn't it up to us to say to the town council, are you kidding me? Just saying.
I point to not only the data and statistics, and I caution and hazard being statistically driven and led. There are some folks that would say that, well, we are protected and safe, and the residents of Bedford are well protected and safe.
And I don't mean to construe that we're not, but obviously it's at great cost to the department.
It's certainly a great cost to the department, and
I don't mean financial cost.
And
I mean
and it is
moral, morale, safety issues, paramount safety issues.
Paramount safety issues for our residents and the officers. As activity begins to increase, and as we see these numbers increase, the concern that all of the command staff at Bedford PD has is that we reduce and sometimes have no reserve capacity, which means that we are at the tipping point in some occasions where all of our forces, if we look at it from a military perspective, all of our field forces are deployed. We have no reserve capacity. You never want to go into battle with no reserve capacity, because if there were to be another event that occurred, we wouldn't have the capacity to be able to handle that. We would then have to rely on mutual aid from another department. And that is there, that mechanism is in place. In recent cases, the most recent serious case that we had, we certainly utilized mutual aid. We had Merrimack police officers that arrived. We had state police officers that arrived. However, that takes time. The response time that we have for what we call our top priority calls here in Bedford, we will be able to respond to our residents' needs more than 75% of the time in less than 2 minutes, which is a pretty fantastic response time given the breadth of the size and the traffic situation that sometimes our officers face.
But what happens if there's multiple situations going on at the same time?
If there's multiple situations that go on, and
We've
that
got a
does,
problem, right?
And that does occur.
Of course it does.
How it impacts us most frequently is, and we've looked at even times of the day of the week, so that we're trying to figure out, based on the data, if we had additional capacity, where would we put that capacity to be best utilized. For example, we can predict within a 3-hour to 4-hour time frame when most of our shoplifting calls come in, and on which days. And so shoplifting, it seems like a sort of an innocuous type of event.
Not really.
But you know,
it affects all of us. If no other way, it affects us all what we pay to
does.
make up for the shoplifting.
It does. You pay for it in various ways.
Exactly.
How it impacts Bedford Police Department is that if we even had one individual that's arrested, that individual has to be brought to the scene, from the scene to the police department. We have rules and regulations in place that require 2 officers for safety reasons to be present in booking while that person is processed. It takes anywhere from 45 minutes to an hour and a half, depending on the severity and nature of the particular case. We're looking at shoplifting that has almost doubled over the past year. We're at about 180% of
some of it due to the big box stores in town, correct?
Certainly. That's exactly right. As we add additional commercial capacity, commercial retail, which is great in terms of a lot of things. We don't have to go to another town to shop. We have, you know, great stores that we can go right down the street from where we live. It's more convenient, and all that is great. But at the other end of that equation is that at the same time it does draw capacity from the police department and potentially the fire department if there's fire and EMS events that occur. You know, on the fire side, while we still respond, as you add more and more rooms for assisted living as well as other nursing homes, that increases the drain on capacity for the fire department. Police officer does respond for a limited purpose, but at the end of the day, it's the fire and EMS folks that go from call to call to call. So while we increase those numbers of rooms and beds, recognize that the complementary you know, drain on capacity for fire and EMS is also prevalent. We look at our fire assist calls, which have grown fairly consistently at the same time, because we do send police officers.
I was going to say routinely, every time the ambulance or fire engine goes out, there's a cruiser like right by it, isn't it?
That's true, and we do that for a particular reason. Now, not every call elicits the same level of response. There are various code levels that are invoked, and when it reaches a specific code level, then our communications staff automatically sends a police officer. Now, why do we do that? Well, we have 2 people that are alive today in Bedford as a result of police officers that were available to respond to life-threatening medical events because they were
trained to use the defibrillators.
They were field deployed. Our folks were available. They were out there. They weren't on another call. And those 3 officers, 2 on one incident and 1 on another incident, both used, in one case CPR, in another case used an automatic defibrillator, brought those 2 gentlemen back to life. And when we presented which was a great thing, we had a life-saving awards ceremony presented to the 3 officers. The cardiologist who actually attended to both of those victims was present.
Oh, no kidding.
He lives in Bedford, and he came to the ceremony. And he spoke to us and told us that it was the quick action by those officers that enabled those 2 individuals to survive that life-threatening situation. That's the capacity that I need to be able to make sure we still have available as our calls go up. In the future, my fear is that as those calls for service, accidents, other types of crime continues to increase, and we are deploying our officers to answer those calls and we have no additional capacity, my fear is that those officers won't be available in the future.
And that could happen. That has happened in other places.
And I don't
repeatedly.
Right. And so I'm in the position of simply, and I appreciate the opportunity to come on with you to simply present the information, the data, through this medium to the residents and other folks so that they make an informed decision. This is the same data that has been presented to the council. It's not different.
Well, it's not just staffing either. I mean, I understand that not every cruiser has its own defibrillator. And again, why? I mean, doesn't it seem as though this should be a budget item that we as residents would say absolutely support? I can't imagine a Bedford resident standing in front of the council going, they don't need that. Why would we spend our money on that? But I can imagine a whole lot of people saying, wow, I would have thought they had them already. And I think you have a lot more examples of what should be on the budget, what should be supported, but you haven't even been able to put on the budget because you knew that it wouldn't even be considered. And this is what bothers me, and it scares me, frankly. And it doesn't scare me just for the residents of Bedford, it scares me for the members of the police department.
It's an evaluation and a recognition of prioritization. Mm-hmm. At the end of the day, as I say, the first priority is staffing.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely.
We can have all the bells and baubles and all the whiz-bang technological stuff in the world that makes us more efficient and effective, mm-hmm. and it has done that. We've been mm-hmm. able to stretch that rubber band pretty far to be able to continue to deliver and actually improve the effectiveness of our public safety core services mm-hmm. and increasing capacity by adding community policing programs. So we've been using technology to stretch that efficiency and effectiveness quotient mm-hmm. A fairly good distance. However, one of the additional tensions on that band is those calls for service mm-hmm. that keep tugging, and there's more and more pressure being increased on that rubber band every single day. And so my concern is that we have to recognize what those external factors over which we have no control will do and mm-hmm. how they impact the delivery of core public safety services here in the town of Bedford. So that's why it's important to fully recognize and for the folks to understand what the data is, what it mm-hmm. means, what the experience is that myself as well as mm-hmm. the captain and lieutenants in the command staff have all, in those many years, we have over 100 years of experience collectively in law enforcement, and prioritize what we actually need. We in a perfect world, it'd be great if we could get mm-hmm. everything today, yeah. but we recognize that we can't. Yeah. And so we then have to prioritize what's most important. And I think that's what bothers me, because again, I'm not saying that anything that's showing up on the budget or that other departments are looking for might not be important, and I'm sure none of them put things into the budget unless they felt they could justify it. But as a resident of Bedford, I'm a whole lot more concerned with what I believe to be life safety issues than I am in maybe convenience issues. I mean, I've heard the argument, and again, I'm sure the people in planning will hate me, but I know that they very, very much want to have another administrative person there. I understand that people are kind of killed with paperwork. I understand that every now and then somebody may complain because they don't get something they need fast enough from that department. I understand that the people who are the professionals don't feel it's the best use of their time to be interrupted because somebody comes in who needs a record and they have to stop doing, you know, the thing they're highly trained for to go do a clerical duty. I get it. I understand it. But again, does that bother me as much as there's not enough cops on the street or there's not enough firemen? I mean, to me, the priority, here's the clerical position in planning, here's the police department position over here. That's a value judgment that...
but I think most residents would agree. I mean, I don't think I'm unique. Well, I might be unique that I maybe talk more than a lot of people, and I'm willing to come on and make a fool out of myself on television or whatever. I mean, but as a resident, I don't think I'm unique. I think if people really understand the needs, and I don't know that they do. I genuinely don't know that they do. I don't know if enough people pay attention to the budget or look at it or see what it means or what the impacts of it are. And everybody has their sacred cows. Everybody has their wants. You know, if you ask one Bedford resident, they'd say, I wish they'd pick up my garbage every Friday. Ask another one and they'd say, I go to the library twice a week and I hate it when I can't get a parking space the first turnaround. Or, you know, whoever you talk to will have some little thing that's their sacred cow. But for all of us, you know, for the big picture, I mean, to me, it's a no-brainer. Right now, we've got to focus on the most important things. And to me, as a resident, who I don't think is particularly unique, I think public safety has to be one of my biggest concerns in this day and age. Much more so than whether or not there's more employees at the town office building or what have you. And again, they'll hate me. They'll figure that I'm dissing them. I'm not dissing them. But, you know, the reality is all of us, well, maybe there are some folks in Bedford who money's not an object and, you know, they're living the good life and it's not a concern. But I kind of think that most of us in Bedford probably have had to tighten our belts. Have you? I have. Are finding challenges with keeping up with everything, and we'll find challenges when we get those new tax bills. Some residents won't. They'll just write the check. But I think a whole lot of us are going to look at it and go, okay, and what are you spending the money on? And I guess this is what I'm pushing, that people, we are going to spend the money, but let's spend it the right way. Which is why I'm really kind of being obnoxious about this. And I think public safety has to be at the top.
America is a great country.
Yes, it is.
We have a democratic process that allows this kind of debate to occur. And I think that any debate over how we spend our tax dollars, whether at the local, the state, or the federal level, is healthy. The more people that are engaged, the more people that have the information available so that they can make a learned decision based on their value system and beliefs is better for us all. Because collectively, as we come together as a community, I am confident that the residents will make those right decisions as they have in the past and as they have in the future, so long as they're given the information and data to weigh that's impartial, balanced, and not reflective of a particular program that is special to a particular individual. In my case, I simply want to make sure that the residents are fully informed, that they understand what the current situation is, what the current needs are, what the projected needs are, and how we are working towards meeting those needs, and what the consequences and impact is. Because at the end of the day, I think that one of the questions that they will certainly have in their mind is, what is the impact if we don't do this? What is the impact if we don't hire more police officers, if we don't hire more firefighters? What's the impact if we don't build a new fire station?
A lot bigger than if somebody has to wait in line a little longer at the town office building for a record.
And so you balance that, because there is a consequence to not having that individual that's present to be able to service your needs at the town office building. There are consequences to each and impacts to each one. And what do we do in terms of articulating what the impact and consequences are? And so I thank you for the opportunity of being able to present in a more extended way, in a little bit more depth and detail, what the potential impact is today and in the future if we don't consider what the external forces and factors are that are affecting our core public safety services, whether it is police or fire. On the police side, not speaking for Chief Wiggin, but on the police side, the economic development, residential development, transiting traffic, and increased population, particularly daytime commercial population,
Absolutely.
as well as the national crime trends, has all combined to put an additional drain on our department, which, when compared to other communities in the region, is already understaffed. There's also, I think, a demonstrated need and desire from the community to have additional community engagement programs. The community policing program, to me, is an integration of the public and the police department in a way that policing was originally designed to operate in the United States over 200 years ago, because there is no force of any size or magnitude that can effectively police any population. I think some of that dynamic was played out on the streets of Iraq in 2006. We had a lot of troops there, and yet when we were hard-pressed to really contain what was going on without a strategy that engaged the population. The same holds true here in a global sense, and that is engaging the public to help the police department protect the residents themselves. And that engagement process is through our community policing programs, by bringing folks in to have that dialogue either with seniors, children and young adults, business and retail, or our neighborhoods. Particularly now with the concern over public safety in connection with the most recent case that we had in Proclamation Court, community policing programs, our neighborhood watch groups, getting residents in an area together to talk about what we can do to help protect ourselves and to help the police department protect us. What can we do in terms of safety and security? What can we do collectively and individually to be more engaged with the police department, to heighten awareness, heighten sensitivity, heighten our vigilance? And not to say that Bedford is not a safe community. It already is. It's much more safe than other communities of its size.
Oh, yeah, guaranteed.
But having said that, we always need to improve.
And we're not in a bubble. And Proclamation Court demonstrated that. We're not in a bubble.
No community is an island unto itself. And of
No.
course, if it may be an island up off the coast of Maine, and you have to get a boat to get there.
Yeah.
But you don't
Yeah.
need a boat to get to Bedford. All you need is a car or a bicycle or a motorcycle, and you're here and you're gone in 5 or 10 minutes.
What makes me fearful is it's going to take some terrific tragedy or some wild-eyed situation that we can't even imagine before people really get the concept about what we have to do in town. That's what scares me.
We prepare for the worst and hope for the best.
And it shouldn't be that way.
We can't have...
You shouldn't have to hope.
Right.
You know, you should be able to prepare and just say we're prepared and not have to do the hope part.
It's in terms of the analogous situation with the military, which is the debate that's going on for the last 60, 70 years after World War II. How many ships do we need in the Navy? How many divisions do we need in the Army? How many squadrons do we need in the Air Force? How many bombers? How many strategic missiles? All this debate has ebbed and flowed politically and professionally for the last 60 years, and it continues on today. At some point, we look to our military chiefs of staff, the Joint Chiefs, to be able to come, and the secretaries of the various armed services to come before Congress and, in their professional experience, tell them, based on the threat that they see today and what they project the threats to be based on the intelligence that they have in the future, what defense posture is required for the United States to be able to project safety beyond its borders to ensure all our residents are safe, both here and abroad. I kind of look at it in the same way, and I bring it down to the local level, and I look at the same dynamic, and that is, what is the threat that we face today? What is the threat that we face in the future? And based on that, what do we need to do to be able to be prepared to make sure that our residents are protected and safe?
Isn't it safe to say that the political decisions that were made did not take into full account, when you're dealing with the military, what the military folks said, and that the political decisions were made us pretty vulnerable?
There's consequences that attach to all those decisions.
Yeah.
Some going back, I've been around, I have gray hair, so I can remember some of the debate that went on post-Vietnam and that negatively affected the capacity of the United States to be able to project itself both regionally and globally. They were largely corrected during President Reagan's tenure, when there was additional emphasis placed on DOD. In times of threat, we look to the military to protect ourselves. When we have natural and other types of disasters, whether they're homegrown or environmental, such as hurricanes and things of that nature, we look to our public safety servants to be able to protect us. And some would argue that we don't have enough military capacity even today. Others would argue we have too much. The same holds true here in Bedford. Some would argue
I bet somebody who's on their third or fourth trip to Iraq wouldn't say that they have too much.
That could be possibly so. The rotational schedule that the military has is sort of analogous to the rotational schedule that we have for police officers. They can't work 24 hours a day.
No, they can't.
Certainly not safe for them, so we have to put them into a schedule so that we have fresh resources available 24/7, 365. Military is no different. They deploy their forces based on a rotational schedule that they feel is appropriate to make sure that those troops that are fresh coming into the field and then are brought back home for rest and refit.
And the politicians have messed that up pretty good.
The debate still rages on.
Well,
and the debate here in Bedford focuses on what our needs are, what our threat level is, and what we need to look at in the future. And so it's an opportunity to put that information out there, put the data out there, and allow people to, as you say, have that debate, engage the democratic process, and make the best decisions that you feel that are necessary for the tax dollars and your safety here in Bedford. My job is to make sure that I deliver the best public safety service for your value. And by stretching technology, going back to high-tech policing, those are all programs, even community policing is another effort to stretch that dynamic so that we can deliver high-quality core public safety and police services every single day to our residents to protect them and make sure that they both are safe and feel safe. Those are two different things. And so I want to make sure that we continue that on into the future.
You know, I have a quick practical question for you. Just as it stands right now, what's on the budget that would give you only one police officer and the 3 cruisers that would get sometime before 2013 was out, hopefully, and a couple of other minor things that you're looking for, a half-time administrative person. Just that alone, and what would that actually break down to in dollar cost for the average Bedford homeowner?
The calculation based on the manager's proposed budget and the impact of those increases were factored out, and it amounts to, if you were a homeowner whose home was valued at $400,000 here in Bedford, the fiscal impact on you would be $7.20 in the fiscal 2013 budget if they were to fully fund the town manager's proposed police budget.
So $7.20 for
a year.
On a house value of what?
$400,000.
Wow. So it wouldn't even be that for somebody whose house is 300 or 250 or what have you.
Correct.
Amazing. That is not even the price of a sandwich and a drink at Subway, for crying out loud. Do you think public safety, do you think the safety of our offices, do you think our safety, do you think the police department is worth more than $7.20 to us? You know what? You got to get to these meetings and say so, because it probably wouldn't even be double that to give them everything they really need. So, you know, it'd be like taking a date and maybe getting 2 Subways. Think about it. Well, our job as residents is to understand all this and to make the necessary noise to make the things happen that the professionals in our town tell us need to happen. And he's certainly, you know, the utmost professional in terms of the public safety sector. And, you know, again, because of timing, we will be posting this show on YouTube and such, making it available to people. And what I really want to get across to people is this. Tomorrow, December 5th, there is a budget workshop. Now, some of you won't see this before that, but that does not mean you cannot communicate with council members, because between December 5th and next Wednesday night, December the 12th, the council will be reviewing and listening and hearing from people and so on. And it's expected that on the 12th, they will kind of do their final work on the proposed budget and vote on what they think it should be. And then, excuse me, obviously in January, I mean, we still have time, because it'll go to public hearing in January. Again, changes can be made. It will go to town meeting. Again, changes will be made. But I'll tell you, I can tell you this, after years of working as a lobbyist, it's a whole lot easier to get change in the beginning than to try to do it in the end of the process when people have fixated on what they think is right. And in this case, I guess I'd be talking about the council because they're the ones who'll get the thing moving. So, my goal is for people to know what's happening. I think you've done a great job in talking about it. We will, I hope you still plan to do a Tell It Like It Is show to continue to talk about the technical stuff. Sure. And I think it's great that you were the first guest on this newly launched show, Public Officials Tell It Like It Is. So for all of you who watched this, brand new show for you, and it's going to be a good one, and I think today's was, and hopefully you all recognize the importance of what Chief Bryfonski has had to say, and you will get on the phone and talk to council members, and you will show up at meetings and make your voice heard. And that's the best we can ask of you today. Thanks for watching. Thank you, Chief.
Thanks for having me. Appreciate it.
Okay, and we'll hope you'll see you in just a few more days with something new. Bye-bye.